All right. Well, before I begin today, I just want to open up with a little personal announcement about my family. For years, I've been trying to witness to my family, and because a lot of them are unbelievers and hostile to the gospel, and because I love Jesus so much, that's made me kind of public enemy number one for a lot of my family, because, they'd be like, "So Jeb, how's the weather? You should believe in Jesus." Because like we talked about last week, Jesus is the door. You want to go to heaven, you got to go through the door. You got to go through Jesus. Otherwise, you've got no hope of being saved. Well, one of the most hostile members of my family for years has been my Uncle Joe. I mean, he just doesn't want anything to do with the gospel. He doesn't want to have anything to do with Jesus. He doesn't believe in God. He's kind of an atheist, kind of a communist, and just doesn't want anything to do with Jesus. Well, our family was rocked with the news that he's got widespread colon cancer that's already spread to other parts of his body. And so I would like to encourage everyone here and everyone watching this video to immediately, just pray for my Uncle Joe, because he really needs Jesus and he's running out of time. When we're running out of time, when we're running out of life, a lot of us can look back at our life and think about how we've lived, and whether or not what we've lived is a life that was really worth living. And we're all young in this life. I still think of myself as a young guy, and we should have our whole lives ahead of us. I mean, the way I drink soda and Monsters, I might fall over tomorrow, but we should have our whole lives ahead of us. But we should live that life well. And, when I was young, I had all these dreams about how I wanted to live my life. When I was really young, maybe Austin's age, I wanted to be president of the United States, because I thought the key to happiness, the key to living a good life, was power. You will do what I say when I say it. Beep. And you will do it. Bleep it now. That was my idea of happiness. Me and my cousin John used to go around my Uncle Joe's house, and we'd be playing in his garden that he always was so good about my Uncle Joe was such a great gardener. He always had these great plants all over the place.
Potatoes?
Rose bushes and all these flowers type of thing.
So no potatoes?
No potatoes. I was the potato farmer. One day, Sherry asked me what I was doing. I said, "I'm planting potatoes." He's like, "Well, but why are you planting the whole yard full of potatoes?" I mean, there were like 60 potato plants. I was the potato farmer in our family. And Sherry made me dig up all those potatoes, and I was upset about that. But anyways, me and my cousin John would run around my Uncle Joe's yard, and we'd talk about how I'd be president for 8 years, and then he'd be president for 8 years, and then I'd be president for 8 years. We thought that as long as you kept bouncing back and forth, that we could just be president together, like, for the rest of our lives. The Kim Jong-un family, just president for life of America. This was our vision of what it would be like to have a good life. And then, as I got older, like 2 weeks later, I thought, I'm going to be an astronaut. And that's how I'm going to be happy, is I'm going to go to space, and I'm going to walk on the moon, and I'm going to do all these really cool things. And then I thought, you know what? I don't want to be an astronaut because, you're strapped to a rocket. These things occasionally blow up. I don't want to die. So I'm going to be a soldier. And I'm going to be a cool officer. And so my dream was to be like this military hero or something. Or something. And time goes on, and I think, you know what? I'm not really going to be good at being a soldier because I don't like running. I like sitting down. So I thought, well, maybe I could find happiness in life by having a girlfriend. I was in high school at this time, so there was this girl that I was trying to be sweet with, and she was pushing me at arm's length, and it's a good thing that she did, because if I had gotten together with her, my life would have been wrecked, because she just wasn't good for me. But there were so many different schemes that I've had for trying to be happy. Like for a while I thought the key to happiness was, I'm going to be the mighty hunter, and if I could only become a trophy killer, then I will be happy in life. And then I've gone on hundreds of hunts since then, and I've shot many animals, and I've really had many great adventures, that were really valuable for me, but it didn't really make me happy. We're here at Joy Church, and this is something that we want is happiness. We want to figure out how to have a good life, how to be happy. And joy is so much more important than happiness, because joy isn't about what's going on. It's about our being content with life, our being thrilled with life, apart from the circumstances. Happy comes from the word happenstance, which means what's going on. Joy isn't about what's going on. It's about an overall quality of life that surpasses happiness. Because our circumstances could stink, but we could still be joyful. The Apostle Paul was in prison, and yet when he wrote the Philippians, he kept talking about joy. And he kept talking about joy. And he kept talking about joy, because joy isn't about what's going on. It's about, we're good. We're good. And people try to get good in many different ways. Like movie stars, they get rich and famous. They must be happy. Well, TMZ kind of exposes how happy the movie stars are. They're always getting divorced. They're always getting plastic surgery because they're not happy with the way they look. They're always doing drugs. If the world's right, then Hollywood should have the happiest, most joy-filled people in the world. Because if money and fame and popularity gives you happiness and joy, then the movie stars should be the most content people on earth. But we read TMZ and we read extra, and we find out that the movie stars are not having much fun in life. There was a man he was preaching to me once, and he talked about how he was rich and how he was a playboy and how he had all these fancy cars and how he thought he had everything. He had money, he had power, he had women, and he thought, I've got it all. This is the best that I can have out of life. And so he took a gun and was going to kill himself, because if this is as good as life gets, life isn't worth a thing. Fortunately, he decided to follow Jesus. And he put the gun down. You know, trying to find happiness is something that people do kill people over and rob people over and do all kinds of horrible things because selfishly they're trying to be happiness. They're trying to be joyful. They're trying to get it. I mean, look at Korea. Korea is divided because of the plague of communism. And communism at its source is trying to find happiness, trying to find unity and brotherhood apart from Jesus, apart from God. You know, Karl Marx in his writings said that religion is the opium of the masses.
What's opium in masses?
It's like saying that it's the marijuana of the population.
Oh.
It's the methamphetamine of of everybody. Karl Marx is saying that religion is like a drug that kind of tweaks you to not think. And it's an opiate, which is like, it's a drug that makes you feel good, but it destroys you. And Marx's argument was that religion gets you to think about the future, and you don't want to take care of the life now. And so communism is very anti-religion. That's why wherever you have communist countries, you've got persecution of Christians. In the 20th century, something on the order of 100 million Christians were killed by communists. You had something like 5 million, if you look on my YouTube channel, there's a video called Atheism Kills. It's about how communism throughout the 20th century, and it documents each year, 20,000 priests killed by communists, 1.2 million Armenians killed by communists, 20 million people killed by Mao and communism. It documents the crimes of communism, the crimes of this atheistic system of people trying to find happiness apart from God. Now, what Karl Marx said wasn't true. Religion doesn't blind you to the here and now. In fact, I would argue that if you're a religious person, if you're a Christian, then you are particularly concerned about the here and now. And if you look through history, it's frequently the Christians who are starting hospitals. It's the Christians who are starting orphanages. It's the Christians who are starting charities to get the quality of life up now. One Christmas I was talking with an atheist, and I said, you know what, this year my church, Westgate, donated $186,000 to building wells in Africa. This was a donation that we scraped together in one day to build wells. And we do this every year. Every year, if you look at Westgate, they put together at least $100,000 to build wells in Africa. And I asked the atheist, how much money has your atheist organization, this is just one church, in one small little town, in one corner of the world, how much money has your atheist organization donated to building wells in Africa? You know, because he was trying to give me this speech about how religion harms people and all this stuff. And I'm like, look, this is just one small example. And I could give you example after example after example after example of Christians helping people improve their quality of life in the here and now. So contrary to what Karl Marx said, religion is not the opium of the masses that deludes us into not thinking about the here and now. On the contrary, Kim Jong-un is wrong. Religion forces us to think about the poverty and to think about the problems of the here and now. If you look at the Mother Teresas of the world, and if you look at the Gandhis of the world, and I'm not endorsing all of what these people believed. I mean, Gandhi was a Hindu. He was an idol worshiper. Without Jesus, nobody has hope. But what I'm saying is that religious people are the most conscientious people about the here and now. But we're still stuck with the problem of how do we live a good life? What's life supposed to be about? Well, you know, we've got our whole lives ahead of us. Rather than being at the end of our lives, like my uncle is, and looking back and thinking we could have done it all differently. And again, I'd like you to pray for him. He's an atheist. He's hostile to the gospel. He doesn't want to have anything to do with me because I keep talking about Jesus. You know, I don't just talk about Jesus when I'm at Joy Church. You can't talk to me for 5 minutes without Jesus coming up because everybody around me wants to talk about Jesus for some reason. I love Jesus. He's my best friend. Even if somebody's angry and hating Jesus and dissing him, I like that person because at least he's talking about Jesus. He's talking about my best friend. Even if he's dissing my best friend, I still like the person because he's at least talking about him. How do we live a good life? You know, we've got our whole lives ahead of us. It would be a travesty, a tragedy, if we live our whole lives and on our deathbeds we look back and say, I wish I could have done it all differently. No, let's look forward. Let's do it right. Because we've only got this one life, and then we've got to be accountable for it for all eternity. You know, last week we talked about how Jesus is the door, how we've got to go through Jesus to be saved, to go to heaven, because Jesus is the door that gets us into heaven. You know, as Jesus said in John 10, starting in verse 7, most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and will go in and find pasture. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and destroy. And that's why when you see systems of the world without Jesus, they steal and they kill and destroy. Communism promises peace and prosperity and brotherhood. But then when it comes, when it takes power, they steal and they kill and they destroy. Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. Jesus comes so that we can have an abundant life, so that we can do life right. There are a lot of problems that we have in life, and it's because of our sin. It's because of our sin that we have problems in life. I mean, look at the first sin, right? You know, Adam and Eve, they're in the Garden
Of Eden.
They're in the Garden of Eden, that's right. And they've just sinned. You know, because there was one rule. It's like, look, I've got one rule for you. Don't touch the red button. It's like, they gotta do it. They gotta do it. There's one rule. Don't eat from one tree. You can have all the trees. You can eat from anything you want. Just not that one. And they said, you know what? How bad could it be? How bad could it be? God said, you eat from that tree and you're going to die. And they ate from the tree and instantly they died. Instantly. They didn't die physically. Spiritually, they died. And that's the death that really counts. But look at the consequences of that spiritual death. Genesis chapter 3, God goes through the consequences. Because you have done this, you are cursed. You are cursed more than all cattle. He's talking to the snake at that point. You are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat of the dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will bruise your head, and you will bruise his heel. Then to the woman, remember she sinned first. I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. So you want to find out why pregnancy hurts so much? We sinned. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Then to Adam he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your faith you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. So instantly they died spiritually. And they started the process of dying physically. We have to work for a living. We've got to work hard. I've got a lot of jobs because it takes hard work to survive. There's a lot of pain and suffering in life. And it's all because of sin. I mean, just think about the sins in our own life. If we're gluttons, we become fat. Something that I'm unfortunately all too familiar with. There are consequences to the sin of gluttony. If you're married and you cheat on your wife or you cheat on your husband, you can get divorced. Or if you're in high school and you start sleeping around, you could get diseases. Bad diseases. If you steal, there are consequences. You could go to jail. If you murder somebody, you could go to prison for the rest of your life. Or the state could even put you to death because you murdered. Because there are consequences to sin. If I lie to you, you won't trust me anymore because there are consequences. If whatever I do in sin, there are consequences. And I lose something because of that. And I might get away with it for now. But in Galatians, Paul says, don't be deceived. God is not mocked. For what you sow, you will reap. If you sow to the flesh, you will reap destruction. If you sow to the Spirit, you will reap eternal life. If you sow sin, you might, if you plant sin, you might not reap the benefit of the consequences of sin right away. You might get away with it if you smoke marijuana. The cops might not catch you right away. I don't know if you ever saw The Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but, it kind of made fun of action movies. The bad guy shoots somebody and instantly the cops start running at him. And then the action hero villain and the action hero come to real life and they experience what real life is like. And the bad guy kills a man and there's no cops. And then he looks around. I just killed a man! And then a man says in a New York accent, shut up! In real life, you might get away with murder. You might get away with it. And when I was in high school, I wrote a book that I never published. But I wrote a book about a criminal who spent her whole life getting away with crimes. And his life getting away with crimes. And then one night they had a dream. And in the dream they died and they go to the heaven and Jesus says, depart from me, for I've never known you. And they wake up in this cold sweat because they realize they can never get away with it. That God's keeping a perfect record of everything that they're doing. And now that they've got to reap the full consequences for their sin. You see, sometimes God lets us get away with it. Sometimes God makes it so that we get caught right away. I steal a cookie and my wife comes out and the cookie's still in my face. There's chocolate all over the place. I got away. I didn't get away with it. I got caught red-handed. But sometimes something far worse happens. I eat the cookie and she never knows. And I just get fatter. And then sometimes that happens. Sometimes we get away with it. And it turns out that the consequences of getting away with it are far worse than if we'd gotten caught. But there's just that truth that sin has consequences. On the other hand, righteousness has rewards. And this is something that you can see. If you do the right thing, if you tell the truth, there could be some uncomfortable moments, but there's that reward of doing the right thing. When I was first out of college, I was given my first job as a supervisor with my security company. And I was at my first assignment as a supervisor. And I was doing this patrol. And this building had just retard patches on the roof. And I was doing my patrol. And for whatever reason, I didn't realize that it was fresh tar, so I stepped in it. And, I didn't think much of it, so I just brushed it off of my shoes, and I just went about my day. Well, a couple hours go by, and I overhear the manager yelling at the company that put the tar, saying, "You didn't do this job right. We went to the roof, and there was this patch of tar that was all screwed up. So you didn't do your job right." And instantly I knew that they were talking about the patch of tar that I stepped in. And instantly I knew that they were blaming the other company, and they weren't blaming me. They didn't think I did it. I thought I'd gotten... Sorry. Sometimes there are instant consequences. You forget to turn off your phone, and you don't get away with it. You get instantly caught. But this time, with the tar, I wasn't caught at all. They were blaming somebody else for my mistake. And I was tempted to let them take the blame. She was yelling at them. She was threatening to sue. And I was tempted to let them take the blame, but I told her, you know what? That bad job on the roof, that was my fault. I stepped in it. It was my bad. And you know what? They didn't fire me. In fact, they kept me around. And from that day on, no matter what I said, they knew they could trust me, because they knew that if I screwed up, that I would tell them the truth. And no matter how far-fetched what I said, because sometimes when you're in security, you see some pretty far-out stuff, and you're the only witness. But no matter how crazy what it was that I saw, my property manager always believed me, because they knew that if it was my fault, that I would tell them. There are consequences for doing the right thing. And there are rewards for it. And because I fessed up to something that I could have gotten away with, that I had gotten away with, they knew they could trust me. And this is the case. I want to make a little distinction between righteousness and holiness. Do you guys know what the difference is between righteousness and holiness?
Not really.
Righteousness is being right in front of other people. Holiness is being right in the sight of God. If we live a sinful life, problems grow worse and worse because of that sin. If we live a holy life, there might be problems because of it, but there are problems that come up because other people are sinning, because other people are doing what God doesn't want them to do. When we live a holy and righteous life, when we do what's right before God, and when we do what's right before other people, our problems start going away. And the problems that remain are because other people are sinning, they're doing what's wrong, and there are consequences for that sin. And they are affecting us. When we follow after God, it solves so many problems. But problems remain because other people keep screwing up. A couple years ago, 5-6 years ago, we got a horrible call from my mother-in-law that my wife's cousin had been murdered. Her cousin and her aunt had been murdered. And it was a terrible shock to the family. And so we flew to New Jersey, and the family was gathered, and we were all in shock, and we were all scared because they hadn't arrested the murderer yet. And, you know, my wife's uncle had been called in for questioning because it was his ex-wife that had been murdered. And so they were like, you know what, we think you did it. And so that's how he finds out that his daughter and his ex-wife were murdered, was he's dragged in for questioning for 12 hours by police saying, we know you did it. Just confess. And that's how he learned about his daughter's murder, is that he's accused of it himself. Well, after 12 hours, they figure out that he's not the guilty party. They let him go. Turns out there was video cameras of the guy walking away with the shotgun. So, praise God, the guy's now serving 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Praise God, they got this guy. But sin has consequences for innocent people, and not just for the perpetrators of the crimes. Sin is never a good thing. Sin is never something that helps people out. In fact, I can sin and I can hurt all of you. Or you guys can sin and hurt your family. Or if the president sins, he can hurt the whole nation. Like what happened when Clinton was president. His private sin affected the whole nation and the whole world. And it's just, sin is never a good thing. At the end of our lives, there will never be a sin that we can look back with Jesus and say, I'm glad I did that sin. That was a good sin. That was a fun sin. It might have been fun, but the consequences were too much. The penalty is too much. It's like when we don't sleep. The consequence is that we're tired. When we sin, there are consequences. Jesus died and he lived so that we can have an abundant life, so that we can have life the way that it's supposed to be, apart from all of this sin. Jesus didn't die so that we can have a life of one sin after another sin after another sin, and then we die and we go to heaven. Jesus died so that we can have a new life, a holy life. And when we start living a holy life, we find out that it's actually a lot better than sin. If you start eating McDonald's when you're a kid, McDonald's tastes like the best thing in the world. I remember when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to take my first date to McDonald's because it's the best food in the whole world. When I was a kid, I thought McDonald's was the best thing in the whole world. But, after you go to McDonald's a couple of times, it stops being the best thing in the whole world. It starts tasting like cardboard. If you go to McDonald's too much, you start looking like me. Because your body can't process and metabolize the food, and you start going fat. But when you eat a steak or a good dish, something that's delicious, quality kimchi, and you're like, yeah, this is so much better than that garbage that I used to eat. In the same way, sin tastes so good when you're first introduced to it. But after a while, you start feeling cruddy. You might feel guilty, you might feel bad, but you get the consequences for it, and you wish you'd never done it. And you go to holiness, and it's like, it might take a lot of work, like that steak or that kimchi might take a lot of work, but when you do it right, it tastes so good. And you'd rather, once you've had that filet mignon, once you've had that quality kimchi, you don't want the garbage of McDonald's anymore, because you've tasted that something that's so much better. You've had something that's so much better. And when you go to Jesus, at first it might seem like a lot of work, and at first it might seem really hard, but after a while you figure out that it's with Jesus that you really get the abundant life. When we were at that funeral for my wife's cousin who was murdered, I was talking with one of the guests there, and somebody who was living with Uncle Mike, and it was his stepson, and he was a believer, and we were talking about what a tragedy it was that this murderer, had gone on his life. If only he had Jesus. If only he had Jesus, he would never have done this thing. If only he had Jesus, he would, if only he saw how good holiness was, he never would have been even tempted to murder this girl. If only he had Jesus. If only Christians really tasted Jesus, if only Christians really had Jesus, professing Christians, if they only really knew Jesus, if they only lived a holy life, they would never even think about murder. The family was, my Uncle Chris, my brother-in-law Tim, they were mocking me. They were saying, you guys are solving all the world's problems. And I like that now. I'm like, yeah, Jesus solves all the world's problems. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to use that. Jesus solves all of our problems, and he wants to give us that abundant life that's so much better than our sin. That's so much better. I talked about earlier all my dreams, everything that I wanted to do, and it's so much better when we live for Jesus. He gives us this abundant life. He gives us something that's so much better than anything that sin could ever offer, than anything that separation from God could ever offer. When you know Jesus, when you love Jesus, when you walk with Jesus, when you pursue holiness, it gets to be work, it gets to be boring at times. There are some rough patches. I've been going through a rough patch. We've all gone through rough patches. We still get sick. But it's so much better to live life with Jesus than to live life without Jesus. It's so much better to face death when you've had this abundant life than when you don't know God. So that's why when I started to talk today, I feel so bad for my uncle, because he knows nothing about Jesus. He doesn't want to have anything to do with Jesus. He hates the idea of God. And it's it's weighing so hard on me and my mom and my dad, because we do love my uncle. But we just found out this last week that he's got massive colon cancer that's already spread to other parts of his body. So we can't even begin to imagine the pain that he must be going through, thinking that he could be about to die. And it's hard to underestimate the amount of pain that we're going through, thinking that our loved one is about to die without Jesus. So that's why I'm begging you, please pray for my uncle, because he's only got a little bit of time to make the decision to follow the abundant life that Jesus can offer. His time is quickly running out. And it's hard for me to underestimate the pain of what it's like to have someone that you love so much who doesn't know Jesus, who's running out of ticks. I mean, the doctors, they can do a miracle, they can prolong his life, God himself can just take it away in an instant. The thing about death is that you never know the hour. We could all walk out of here and we could get smashed by a bus. Or, like I said, the way I drink Monsters, the way I drink soda, I'm surprised that I haven't keeled over already. It's like my friend Larry. He called me up the other day. He's about 430 pounds and type 2 diabetic and in his mid-60s now. Wonderful friend. He's the guy that taught me so much about Jesus these last 10 years. And, he was telling me earlier this week, if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. I mean, we just don't know when we're going to die. Just don't know. But we've got our whole lives ahead of us. We're young. Most of us are in good shape. We've got our whole lives ahead of us. How much more important it is for us to get on the right path, to follow after Jesus, to follow after this abundant life that he's talking about. Believe me, you don't want to be on your deathbed, looking back, wishing that you could do it all over. Do it right. I can't make decisions for you. I wish I could make decisions for my Uncle Joe. He's got to make his own decisions. He's got to be accountable for himself. I've got to be accountable for myself. You've got to be accountable for you. But I want to encourage you, if you haven't made the decision to follow Jesus, make the decision. Our parents at this stage in life are the ones taking us to church. I want to encourage you, make the decision to follow after Jesus yourself. Doesn't matter what stage of life you're in. If you're watching this video and you're on your deathbed, it's not too late. You can follow Jesus. You can have this abundant life. It doesn't matter if you're a kid or if you're an old man or if you're a young man, if you're middle-aged. We can follow Jesus no matter what point we're at. But we've got to make that decision ourselves. And we've all got to be accountable for our own lives. Or we can let Jesus take the accountability for us. And that's what I did. I gave my life over to Jesus. I said, I don't want to bear the penalty for my own sin. Jesus, you died on the cross for my sin. I want you to pay the penalty for me. And that's what he did. That's what he did. That's what you can do. If you're not following after God, I want to encourage you, follow after God. Make the decision now. Do life right. If you don't know how to follow after God, just do something. Be nice to somebody. Help somebody out. Do something that's not selfish. Give somebody, your muffin from dessert or something, just help somebody out. Just do something cool for somebody. Just start living life right. Take a step in faith. If you haven't been baptized, if you haven't publicly proclaimed, I am going to follow after Jesus, and I'm going to announce it to the world by being baptized, talk to your parents. Talk to your pastor. Tell them that you want to be baptized. Tell them that you want to publicly proclaim, this is my faith. I'm declaring to the world my faith by being baptized. Well, I don't know what it's all about. Take the step in faith. Take the step in faith. Follow after Jesus. If you've already been baptized, find something to do. Find some way to be productive. My wife is taking a stand. She's getting involved with an organization called Real Options, so that she can help give girls who are in crisis pregnancies options for life, options about the sanctity of life, so that they can have the option to have an abundant life with Jesus, so that they can have life for mothers who might want to otherwise kill their children. And, we've been talking about the abundant life, and, it got me thinking about life and how precious life is. And my wife, she didn't know what to do, but she was passionate about this. Find something that you're passionate about. And you can be a kid, or you can be an old person, or you could be a middle-aged person. You don't have to wait till you're grown up to do something for Jesus. You can do something now, just by being nice to other people. Just by willing to help them out. Just find something to do. Find some way to live for Jesus. Find some way to love Jesus. Find some way that says, I love Jesus, and this is my way of praising you. I bring songs so that we can sing. I talk about my life. Find some way that you can live for Jesus. Find some way that you can say, this is how I love Jesus. This is how I love other people. This is uniquely me. This is uniquely my contribution that Pastor Jim can't do, that my friend Sherry can't do. This is something that I can do. This is some way that I can help other people. Think about it. Pray about it. Find something. I want to lift up my wife because she's been thinking for years about some way that she could help other people. And, I had the opportunity of talking from somebody from this organization, Real Options. And you know what? They've got a speaker that comes around and gives talks to youth groups. And I said, hey, I'm pastor of a church. I've got a youth group. Come to my youth group. And they say, yeah, we're going to do that. And they're excited about it. And I'm excited about the future because this person is going to be coming. We haven't settled on a date yet, but they want to come. They want to talk about how it is, and they were excited about singing worship songs with us and praising Jesus with us, because they don't just understand the sanctity of life, they understand the abundant life that we can have in Jesus. I know I went really long today, but I just get so excited when I talk about how cool life can be when we've got Jesus. Because it's really exciting to talk about how cool life is with Jesus. And I just want to encourage you, find a way to love Jesus. find a way to walk in this abundant life. And you can do it now. You can do it when you're 8 years old, or 10 years old, or 12 years old. You don't have to wait till you're 30. You can do it now. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for how good life is and how good life is with you. I want to thank you for that. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen.
Amen. All right.